Hello there, everybody. It has been, what, 3 weeks since we recorded a video, Sailor? Something like that.
Something happened.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff's happened. I went to Wisconsin, top aided to 5Ks. Then there were some bans. Then lots of
Yep.
discussion about ruined decks. People sad, people happy. Questions about what could have changed. But at the end of the day, we have a metagame that looks very, very different than what we had a few weeks ago.
Yeah, absolutely. And on record, congrats again for your such a good run.
Thank you.
We probably built a deck that was too strong, right?
Yeah, the red blue deck was crazy. Yeah, just the draw power, the ability of Sisu to be a one sided board wipe while also adding to the board, and you never had to worry about running out of cards because of Flaversham, and Tomato also kind of contributing to that for sure. The deck
Oh yeah,
was very good.
yeah. I think the new Tamatoa is the reason why we needed to get the ban. It's unfortunate because we were enjoying those decks, and it's not like we wanted to be tier zero. But yeah, it got to tier zero because of him and Coil, right?
Yeah, for sure. But anyway, we have a completely new format. Some people thought red blue was dead, as we saw this weekend. Among many other surprising things, red blue not dead, still definitely a very real deck. But we'll get to that later. I think we kind of broke down what we consider to be, I guess, the 10 most viable decks. We've got some in tier 3, tier 2, and tier 1. It's a pretty big tier 1, spoiler alert, but nothing in tier 0, which is probably good for the game.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, I think let's kick it off with Amethyst Amber, a deck that you've been playing actually. So tell me about it, because it's a weird deck for sure.
Yeah. So the shell of Amethyst, as we all know, can be played with any other color combination, and it works. So it's the weakest one, but also it does very well into the other Amethyst decks. So it's kind of like a meta call deck, I think. And that's why I think it's a tier 3, because it's not gonna hold too well against a wide variety of decks. But if you're expecting to be all amethysts, right? Maybe there's a shift in the metagame, or maybe your current local metagame is all about being amethyst. I think that's a very legit amethyst. And the way that I've had success with it is by playing these evasives that are absolutely monstrous with Rapunzels, right? Because the new Yago that is breakthrough weekend card, right? It's the card that is we're gonna talk about much more
Absolutely.
than we ever did before this ban, right? And because of obviously people expecting more evasive, right, in terms of Diablos, so now we're playing Peter Pans and Yagos and and genies, right? And so all of these get rush, and a rush for 6 for 4 is such overpower. And if they don't deal with it immediately, you have this huge body that you can use Rapunzel on. So I had good success with an Ember Amethyst list against the other Amethyst decks, and it does kind of like 50-50, maybe a little bit unfavored in some matchups, maybe a little bit favored into others against the other color combo.
Yeah, I think that's a good deck. You've got a ton of Rapunzel traps. This may be the best deck at utilizing Rapunzel, maybe that we've ever
100%.
seen. And
Yeah.
but I will say it is a really hard deck to pilot. There's some weird lines. You have to do
Yes.
some stuff that is unusual, and
Yeah.
you're not really rewarded with a broken deck for doing that.
No, you're drawing 3 when everything aligns, right?
Yeah, it's a really hard deck to play. I think it's really fun,
It is.
and for people who want to sit down and practice it, I think there's some potential there.
Yeah.
It's probably not the deck you want to pick up this weekend and bring to a big tournament or whatever.
Yeah, probably not.
All right, so I'm gonna go on to Blue Steel. So we have seen a lot of different iterations of Blue Steel, but I think what we're talking about here is probably Kiwi Birds. It's the deck that
Yeah.
was sort of least affected by the bans, and I personally thought Kiwi Birds was going to fare better. And maybe we'll see it do better in the coming weeks. We've really only had one weekend of tournaments, and there weren't a ton of huge ones.
No.
But Kiwi Birds did not put up a lot of results. Blue Steel in general did not put up a lot of results. It seemed likely to me that it would be okay, and the reason I thought that is because I think one of its worst matchups was the Ruby Sapphire deck, which got obviously much worse, but it turns out it's still viable. So you didn't completely lose that bad matchup. And I think that the Kiwi Birds decks, they don't play all that much removal. The removal they do play can get hit by Ursula Deceiver. You can't shift Bell, or you can't play Bell on turn 1 super consistently. So the deck definitely got worse. And you're not crushing the Emerald decks, and you kind of struggle versus some of the Amethyst decks. So yeah, it didn't have a great first weekend. I don't know. Any thoughts for you on that?
Yeah, it's no, I agree. It's in a weird spot. Like, you would think that it didn't get hit so that it would be just fine because it was one of the best deck, but all the decks that red blue was also checking out of the meta, and blue and the other Sapphire Steel, the heavy item list, right, before the ban, we're checking some of those decks that are now good against this, right? And so not a great time to be playing Kiwi. It's not that it cannot do well, I don't think, right? But it's just not gonna put as consistent results as it was.
Yeah, it's a tough spot. All right, so the next deck we have in tier 3 is Amber Emerald. Now, I'm actually curious. So when you say Amber Emerald, do you mean Chernadogs or do you mean discard?
I think both.
Both. Okay, you think they're both tier 3?
Yeah, I think they're both T3. I think they're by far the worst of the 3 Emerald decks, Emerald discard decks. Solely because they get hit more by Pete's, in my opinion, and they don't have other good tools as like the removal in Emerald Steel, or the tempo stuff, right, in the Emerald Amethyst. I might be putting it a little bit too low, right? The discard deck, and the Chernadog list for me was possible because one of its good matchup was the best deck in the format, or the second best, right? Was Sapphire Steel. But without it, I feel like all the like something like Emerald Amethyst, right? As discard tools, it has things that can fight the board very well also. And so all these Amethyst deck for me are not a great spot to be there either, right? Because fundamentally, what I don't like about these decks is that they're not too good on the draw, right? And I don't think that any of this new format is going to help that situation. And so obviously on the play, this deck is very powerful, right? But I was never convinced of it because of its lack of power on the draw. And I don't think this new metagame changed any of that. In fact, I think it gets worse.
Yeah, I think with regard to the discard deck, when I think of Amber Emerald, I think of a discard deck that was almost tuned specifically to beat the Sapphire decks. So having those two decks sort of fall out of favor as a result of the banning sort of hurts its position naturally. And then the Chernadog deck, I agree, it kind of was preying on blue steel, and you almost think, well, maybe it's okay against green steel, but see, green steel has all the removal for the early stuff, and then you think, okay, well, I'll discard, they'll remove my early stuff, then I'll play a Chernabog, but no, they also have Bruno to take out the Chernabog, so it just it gets you on both ends. Yeah, interesting. So that's our tier 3. Tier 2.
Okay, one that I put there and that you don't really necessarily are convinced about, right, is Blurple. So I've liked Blurple since last set, because every time the meta is all about Amethyst, which I think it is, outside of the 2 Emerald decks, Blurple does very well because it can play the turn 3 genies. And the only bad thing about like early genies and going all on genies is that it was bad to Sisu's. But now that Sisu coil thing is not as prominent, right? And obviously, like DKP's version adds Sisu, but it also doesn't have the coil, right? So it doesn't take as many things. I feel like being the faster Genie decks is gonna be very, very good. I think it has all the tools to fight Emerald Seal. I remember Pandemonium Heart, Joseph Quigley playing top 16 at Continentals versus Zan on Emerald Seal, right? And Joseph had won his LCQ and got into top 16 with Blurple at Continentals. And I remember Zan saying, like, I think it's a bad matchup, but he found a way to make it good. And I think you know exactly what that is, right? And I think that's why you think it's a good matchup for Emerald Seal. But I think there's ways to be good against Emerald Seal if you're not playing against the top of the crop. And also, I think it's the best against the other Amethyst deck because of what I said. So that's why I think it's a tier 2 deck.
Yeah. So just to be clear, s4iler wanted to put Blurple into tier 1, and I made him put it in tier 2. Basically because it didn't have a ton of results this weekend. And I see where you're coming from. I think in an Amethyst metagame, you know, a sort of first principles way to look at it is that if people are playing a bunch of mid-range decks, which the Amethyst tend to be like mid-range grindy type decks, you often want to be the deck going just a little bit bigger, so you're not too slow and fall behind in the early game, but also you have the slightly better late game, so you know, the games will naturally progress there where your cards will be better. And Blurple's really good at that. It has the best late game of the Amethyst decks, so it tends to excel in those grindy mid-rangey mirrors.
And 80s is like the best shark answer, and we're definitely in a shark meta, right?
Yeah, apparently it was news to me, honestly, but yes, you're not wrong. And yeah, I do. So it clearly has answers to Diablo. You know, if you're going to play
all the Amethyst decks, right? Every Amethyst deck is going to run for Genie for Elsa. That's like a given. Like anybody that don't do it are making a mistake, I think. As long as Diablo is like a powerhouse in the meta, right? Like obviously, if everybody hates it out, then we can talk about like shifts, right? But for now, I still think that you should respect it, and I think it's the best. And I think with those cards, it has good answers to Diablos, but also you can even tech it even more if your local meta is all about emeralds still, because you can play Peter Pan Shadows and Yagos in that as well, right? And you can play Bell so that you don't have the Rapunzel trap, but you have the Bell traps, which is also pretty good, right?
Yeah, you've got Bell. There's just like lots of things you can do. I'm not so worried about Diablo. I do think the deck has a weakness a little bit to Ursula Deceiver of all. Obviously, you have rush threats, but Pan Shadow Finder, Elsa, not super great. The Fox, very good at removing Ursula, but I do think against like Emerald Steel specifically, if they're able to take out your characters with an Ursula, you can be in a lot of trouble if you don't happen to have Fox that exact turn. But yeah, I mean, I would like to see Blurple do well. I feel like it's a fan favorite. It hasn't put up the results, but maybe it will, and then I'll be forced to concede and put it in tier 1 for s4iler.
All right. Another deck that I've been playing is Ember Steel. And I was very surprised to see that it's actually just a 50-50 deck now. You don't have matchups where you just crush. And you also don't have matchup where it's unwinnable either. And for me, the other 5 tier 1 decks have good matchups, right? So that's why for me it's in tier 2 and not in tier 1. Because in paper it should be, but it isn't. And the reason why is that Ursula 2 just is so good against it. It's actually insane at how good it is. And even a color combo such as Emerald Amethyst now has ways to do like it always add, but now you can Ursula 2 bounce it player again. And in between those bouncing, that can be a little bit slow. You can also play other discards cards now, right? So that's just so brutal. I feel like, and that's why I think like the songs in Steel against the Diablos are worse than the Amethyst's answers to Diablo.
Yeah, I think the other big issue for Steelsong is muses. There's just a lot of muses in the metagame now, and that card is crazy good against Steelsong. It bounces almost everything. It combos with the Ursula that these decks are all playing. So you can, sing a song, either bounce the Steelsong threat or bounce your own Ursula replayed. It's just
I agree, but I think that the Emerald decks will be targeted on all fronts, and they'll need to make choices. So
That's
it's
true.
easy to say that these Emerald decks have all these answers to these different decks, but they cannot put all of them, right? They need to make choices, and if all eyes are on Amethyst, maybe now it's an opportunity for you, because now they might not be playing the muses, right? Or maybe they do because it's good against Genie. I don't know.
Yeah, it's tough, and I think a lot of these decks. It's hard to. This is what a diverse metagame does. It's very hard to pin down a deck list because every single week you're like, okay, the metagame I thought is different from what I thought, so I have to change like 5 cards in my deck, and then everyone else is changing 5 cards in their deck, and it just repeat ad nauseum. No one ever settles on an exact 60 cards because the metagame is constantly adapting to decks, which is cool. It's fun. If you want to crush one specific tournament, sometimes it's a little bit annoying when you're like, I don't know what I'm going to play against. But
it's a little bit of a lottery, right? Like
a little bit.
The matchup lottery, but also the deck building lottery. So there's more variance involved, I think. Yeah,
For sure. All right, tier 1. It's a big list. 5 whole decks. I'm going to start. Yeah, maybe with the worst of them. Amethyst Steel, which I don't know. It's weird in the sense that I think it was maybe the most played deck on the weekend overall across like all the tournaments. It definitely got some wins
in US.
In the US for sure. Yeah, the Germany tournament was I don't know. We don't have time to talk about the weird metagame differences, but yeah, I mean it did not do well in Germany, but it did well in the US. It was probably the most played deck, but it didn't. I don't think it put up outsized results. I think it had a lot of wins, but that's only because so many people played it.
Yeah.
So I think it's obviously a good deck. Steel, if you want to go low to the ground, you can play Babooms, you can play Fire the Cannons to answer the Diablos. You can play the Amethyst answers to Diablos. Every Amethyst Steel player is going to play some combination of these Amethyst and Steel cards to answer Diablo. So I think that Purple Steel is a deck that wants to play against the Emerald decks for the most part. It's not like dominant or anything, but
it still has the same problem as Blurple, where you still are a little bit soft to Ursula 3.
You definitely
are on your strength, right?
Yep. So it's not free by any means, but yeah, I think it's a good all around deck. It gives you a ton of play lines. It's a deck that's very adaptable. You can put your curve very low, get aggressive. You can play more mid range stuff. I've seen people playing all the way up to Tinkerbell. You're not going quite as high as the Ruby Amethyst decks, but you can play a pretty late game oriented.
And Pete is still such a banger of a card, and I think
especially now
that deck can abuse it the most, right?
Yeah, and it's maybe worth pointing out that this is maybe the best Pete has ever been. Like all of the Ruby decks are playing Be Prepared, and then all of the other decks are like kind of song heavy for the most part. So Pete's like kind of maybe the biggest winner. I don't know.
The best card in the game.
It's
close to, right?
Which is a bad look for me because I'm always a Pete hater and talking about how Pete's overrated, and now I have to kind of shut up and not say anything. but that's like,
sorry, Derek, but Pete is a banger of a card right now.
Yeah, it's great.
Like it was at its worst when the best version of Ruby Sapphire was playing like all these character-based removal, and even like the Cusco instead of the Idaways, right? Like it was really, I was like with our version of Ruby Sapphire, we're really trying to lower the strength of Pete with our builds, but now that this version has been banned, like Pete can run free.
All right. Next on the list, I'm gonna let you talk about it first because you're the one who really loves the deck. But we'll talk about Ruby Amethyst, which had a huge weekend in Germany with a list that I was certainly taken aback by when I first saw it. Well, there were two different lists, but they're both very unique.
Yeah, that's the same idea of
Yeah.
Peter Pan into Genie, Shark, and one was playing Moana as like an evasive crab, right? Obviously, it doesn't do it when it enters play, but when you have Peter Pan Shadow, this new Moana from Arcasia's Island lets you challenge with her immediately. She doesn't have rush by herself, but with Peter Pan she does because she has evasive, and then you can give a +3 to another character, and so she's a monster at killing at banishing opposing genies, right? She's just like takes genies for days, and also now your 1-drop Diablo can also get a +3 and take out something else, right? And all of that can be also set up with the Elsa 5. So I think like the deck works together so well with all these evasive threats, and it also has like Shark. I would say though that the Shark is probably at its worst, right? As opposed to what we've seen in Ruby Sapphire, even in like the old Sisu on Ice Shark version or the Shark Manor, the Keepies version. Those Sharks were much better because you had like How Far I'll Go, and one of the best card to retrieve was Vision of the Future, right? But now you kind of only have Friends, and sometimes there's a B prep. Taking back a B prep makes sense.
Brawl's
right?
a real card for sure.
Brawl, right. I really think so. I really think that this deck has legs, but mostly because it recognizing that the Emerald decks were going to be so powered up by the ban environment that it went directly into, okay, we're going to be the level 2 deck that tries to beat the level 1 decks on week 1 without even giving the time for the Emerald decks to shine for a single weekend, which is very, very, very interesting in terms of how they went straight ahead. Like they kind of like went 2 weeks jump, right? It's like this for me. This list would have made sense next week or in 2 weeks, but they just went straight to it.
Everyone knew. Look, anyone who told you they didn't know Emerald was going to be good this weekend was
obviously
lying. But yeah.
Obviously, and it worked. And I really liked their gambles. I think it was very clever how they built it, and with very short notice, right? Like the ban happened on Tuesday,
yes,
and on Saturday they were crushing all the Emerald decks. Probably like I don't know.
To like come up with these lists that quick is kind of surprising because they're unique lists. They're not. How did you have time to cook up before, Moana? Right? Who has cooked up Moana in 6 days? That's what my brain's saying.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and the other deck was playing Lumiere, which is also like a pain versus all like DKP's Big Sisu, right? As we've seen, it was causing much headache. He still got away with it, but I think that speaks more of the skills of DKP more than anything else. But yeah, I think it doesn't look that good on paper, and I think it will have bad matchups, right? So that for me, it's just like a meta call. And if you're expecting Emerald, that deck is crushing those.
I don't know. I'm gonna leave Ruby Sapphire for last, not because I think it's the best, but because we're Ruby Sapphire players. So now let's dive into the Emerald decks here, and I guess I'll start with Emerald Steel.
Yeah.
So I played Emerald Steel in the ICL this week, earlier today actually, to date the recording. And I think that Emerald Steel to me was sort of the level 1 best deck. Like you see the bans, you're like, okay, so Emerald Steel is going to be good because it was kind of held down by Hiram, and it's kind of the best Diablo deck, like in a vacuum. Just pairing Diablo with the good Steelsongs just makes a lot of sense. I think the deck's very good, but if every Amethyst player is playing 4 Elsas, 4 Pan Shadowfinders, Genies, some people are playing like Iagos, the Ruby decks are playing like Pegasus. It's
Yeah.
the
And
Steel decks.
Sharks.
Like I played against Riplungs, right? In the ICL, he's playing 3 Fire the Cannons. Like if people are packing this much hate for Diablo, it's a tough world out there. It's not going to be free wins. People
No.
obviously came prepared. People knew that Diablo decks were going to be good this weekend, and they didn't. They didn't take a week off and say, "Oh, let's make them prove it." They
No.
packed the hate
They
right in.
respected it. Yeah, they
Yeah.
heavily respected it. Like,
Still, Diablo is going to win you free games. Sometimes Hidden Cove can make it really hard to remove the Diablo. A lot of these targeted threats rely on Diablo having 2 strength or willpower, and if you just bump it up a little bit, it kind of sticks around.
should I tell the secrets on how to protect your Diablo?
I'm curious what you think the secrets are. Sometimes just playing Ursula and Peter enough. I do think people sometimes shift it too soon. Like you can wait a turn. But I'm curious what you have to say.
Yeah, I think now that the best answers are not songs, or obviously you're already prepared to hit those
Yeah.
songs with Ursula too. But I think that there's these amethysts that are looking to challenge it, right?
Yep.
And so I think Pluto is actually insane.
I know, and I was so close to putting Pluto in my ICL deck because I thought the same thing, but I didn't have the stones to do it. Part of me was like, well,
you
why
won
don't I just
anyway, so it didn't matter.
why don't I just play Hidden Cove? But yeah, I agree. Pluto makes a lot of sense, and I did actually pull them out and consider putting them into my deck. It's just hard to fit everything.
Yeah, and
you were talking about it
also,
earlier. You have to make choices. I wanted to play the Muses for
Yeah.
the Mirror and Steelsong, and I wanted to play Pete's for the Steel decks, and it's like you can't put. I mean, I played 2 Beasts because I wanted more draw power. At that point, there's no room for Pluto, so you have to make some choices.
Yeah, that's exactly it, right? Like Emerald Steel are so much targeted. I don't know if they will keep on being targeted, but I think it is because Diablo leads to the worst feeling
It does.
games. So people just want to pack up all the answers possible because they just don't want to lose to those high roll of Diablo.
It is brutal. Someone puts a Diablo in play, even if your deck has the answers, if you don't already have them in hand, you just kind of roll your eyes like, okay, here we go. He's going to draw for 5 turns.
I'm not going to draw it, but they will be on 10 cards, right?
Yes, so I totally get it. And yeah, it's a card you have to respect because if you don't, it will just run away with games. But okay, so that's enough about Emerald Steel. Emerald Amethyst, a very similar deck. It's packing less of the removal and more of the card draw and like rush type threats. It's not it's interesting. In my head, I think of Emerald Steel as being favored against Emerald Amethyst because it seems like it's got like the better actions. But then, the Emerald Amethyst deck is playing so many Diablos. It's got more nut draw potential in the sense that it more easily shifts Diablo, and it's hard to quantify that in testing. Like it's true, but you don't know necessarily what the number is. When both decks are doing their thing, it feels like the Emerald Steel deck is better, but the Emerald Amethyst deck kind of does its thing a little more often.
Yeah, and because it's Mulligan is alteration is cleaner.
Yeah,
you get to have Ursula 2-on-2 more reliably because you can it's so cleaner to get to the shift Diablo on 2 that you can keep Ursula also potentially right more often. And I think it's the best opener in the game, right? Like shift Diablo Ursula on 2, it's just busted.
Yeah.
And also
Hidden Cove up there. By the way, I do think that putting it in the Hidden Cove also very good.
yeah, Hidden Cove is there, but also you could use some of them are playing, and I think it will keep on being the case because of Shark. Some of them are playing Mother Knows Best, right? And so you can Mother Knows Best the singer off of the Emerald Steel player, and now right, it can be like you can really lose the tempo really, really, really quickly. So I think it's a tricky matchup not tricky, but lopsided matchups on either side, right? And I don't think it's like heavily favoring the Emerald Steel deck, and at first I thought it would be, but after seeing it played, I think this deck is very, very good, and it was basically checked last set by Ruby Sapphire with Sisu, right?
Yeah.
And now that it's really doesn't have the draw power to sustain all this discard, it's much harder. Like it's now unfavored. Ruby Sapphire is unfavored into this deck, and so I just feel that it can run free outside of these new Peter Pan Shadows deck
Yeah.
that are everywhere.
So if we want to like compare and contrast the two decks, I would say the Amethyst deck is better against locations. It's maybe a little bit more consistent. I think its plan B is maybe a little bit better. Like I think that the Emerald Steel is a better discard deck, but the Emerald Amethyst does better when things don't come together perfectly. Like you can do the bounce package stuff. You can grind out games in a way that the Emerald Steel deck, if you're not,
you can also finish up games much quicker.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and if time is a concern, that's a thing. But like
you're
less
Genie and Creaky, and suddenly like you're gaining lore, and you don't care about their hands anymore, right?
Yeah,
like,
you're less prone to top decks. I mean, one thing that would happen when I was playing Ruby Sapphire, I distinctly remember like they would empty my hand, but I would be at 8 ink, and I'd be like, "You're gonna quest for 2 a turn. You better hope I don't draw the Sisu in the next 5 turns, because if I do, you might just lose anyway." And then you hit it, and they're like, "Oh, you got so lucky." But you know, the Amethyst deck doesn't have to deal with that because they'll just close the game, and
sooner.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that they're both very viable decks. They maybe suit different players a little bit more one way or the other, but both very good. All right, so that's the Emerald decks. I think, does that leave just Ruby Sapphire? Is that the last one?
The Shark Manor list that we've put here is the tier 1 list. And so that's one is either the Moyen's version that he played last weekend or the Kiwi's version. What do you think about those two lists?
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't catch me dead playing DKP's list. I just, having no answers in the early game to Diablo's not, I can't live with that. There's just no way. Maybe
no brawl, right?
Maybe, yeah, no brawl or coil Sisu, ice block Sisu either. I think that if you, I don't know what the German metagame looked like. Maybe he knew something I didn't. That would not fly in the States. There's just no way. So I really like Moyen's list. I love Moyen's list, actually. And I had kind of given up on Ruby Sapphire, in part because it's just like hard. I don't know. Before, the Ruby Sapphire deck was so strong, and I was good at piloting it, so the wins came easy. And now I'm like, well, now I'll play Green Steel, and now Green Steel is so strong, the wins kind of come easy. I feel like if you're playing Ruby Sapphire right now, you're signing up to struggle a little bit. Like, it's not gonna be a walk in the park to get your wins.
Yeah.
And
outside of this DKP's version, right?
Well, I mean, yeah. Look, if some of your wins will, like, you'll slam some Manors, play some B preps, the game will end. But I think that you're gonna have a lot of slog fests, and I think that DKP's list being weak to Diablo is just untenable in my opinion. But Moyen's list looks really interesting, and I wouldn't put, we saved it for last, but I probably wouldn't call this my number one deck. I don't know what my number one deck would be, but I think I was just surprised more than anything that it did so well, and maybe that's, credit to the great players who chose to play it, but still.
It didn't face a single Emerald deck, right? We need to say that, right?
Yes, yes.
So
Moyen did. Sorry, DKP did not face Emerald. Moyen did, and he came out on top.
Yeah, and like he didn't have the big Sisu, which are potentially very good. And also, I think like the all is found into big Sisu is kind of clever and good.
It is,
right? So in paper, it could have worked also if he had faced any. The issue with it, obviously, is that it also doesn't run Brawl, but can you find a list that can run both these Brawls and All Is Found and Big Sisu? I'm not sure, right? Like, I that's potentially too many cards, right? Like, and maybe you're diluting the deck a little bit too much if you do that. But I'm really interested in seeing how Moyen was able to beat 3 discard decks in his run, because yes, he's running the Brawls, but he's also not running the big Sisu, and it's so like it's Brawl, but if there's a Cove, right, or Pete's being played or whatnot, right, like it can be awkward, right, to deal with this Diablo, and it's not like Scars is all that good, right?
No, I do think Manor against Emerald Steel specifically, Manor is probably pretty good. It's less good against the Amethyst version, but
The other thing is that like a Pirate's Life is so miserable
it
to
is.
draw. Like let's say like the last thing you do right is sail, and you draw into that, and then they Ursula you. It feels so bad, right? Like you,
Yeah.
it's really just a -1.
And it's not like it's not an important card of the matchup either. It's not like either the aggro decks are super,
no, you just
super
want it into
aggressive.
the inkwell every
Yeah.
time, right? So you just don't want to keep it in your hand. It's like a hot potato.
Mm-hmm. It has its spots, but yeah, most of the time it's like not good. It's not what you want. Yeah, I think that's our list. If you had to pick one deck to play this weekend, and try to remove your bias because you'll probably tell me Ruby Sapphire, but if you were someone who was not prone to picking any particular deck, like what would you say is the best choice for this weekend?
So it's very interesting, right? So
is.
how are the Emerald players are gonna adapt, right? Are they gonna adapt? Are they gonna say, oh no, that's fine, right? Some people in Germany found a good Ruby Amethyst list against it. That's fine. We're gonna be good. But what I'm seeing is people looking on Facebook, right? They're looking for sharks.
Yep.
They're looking for Peter Pan shadows. They're looking for Yagos, right? Like that's what people are looking for. I've seen people looking for Moanas. I was like, come on, look at your bulk bin, man. So I still think it will be a rough weekend for Emerald. But if I was it to pick one, it would be the Emerald Amethyst one, because at least I want to be able to fight toe to toe against the other Amethyst deck, right? With like equal weapons, right?
Sure. Yeah, I think I'll make it easy. I would probably play Emerald Steel, try and cheese them out. I don't know. It's a deck I've played a lot recently, so that helps my decision quite a bit. Otherwise, I would consider trying to find a list of Purple Steel that I think can, I don't know, go under the Amethyst decks and also answer the Diablo. It's tough. That's another deck where I want to play like 68 cards, but there's
only so much space. Yeah.
But I don't know. That's how I feel. I'm very excited for future weeks. We'll probably try and do this again next week because I'm sure it'll change quite a bit between now and then.
My feeling is that Ruby Amethyst will have again another great weekend.
I would be surprised, but I love that because it means that we don't know what's going to happen, and yeah, it's a good metagame, I think.
And I think people will probably also play the Kiwi's version, right?
Yeah.
And so any list that can do well against those potentially is a good list, right?
For sure. Now what deck is that? I'll leave that as an exercise to the viewer. But if you find out, please tell me. I'd love to know.
I mean, I've left hints in that video about it. But...
All right. Well, thank you guys all for watching. It was a bit of a long one today. We had a lot to go over, but it was a great time.